A very warm good morning to all of you. Dear students, once again, I would like to welcome all of you to a new session of the Civics class. Today, we are continuing with the same chapter from Civics, chapter number 4, the Supreme Court, part 5. Do you remember what we were discussing in the last class? In the last class, we were discussing about the jurisdiction and powers of the Supreme Court. There we have seen a very detailed explanation about what is meant by jurisdiction and some special powers given to the Supreme Court. So under jurisdiction, we have discussed about three different jurisdictions. What were they? First one, original jurisdiction. Second one, appellate jurisdiction. And third one, advisory jurisdiction. These were the three different kinds of jurisdiction. And we were discussing something further about original jurisdiction. And we have seen the first situation or first condition which comes under original jurisdiction. And that was center state or interstate disputes. Suppose there is a problem between central government and a state government, or if there is an issue between different states, all those cases will be directly coming under the Supreme Court. We have discussed about it in the last class. And today we are continuing with the second occasion, that is protection of fundamental rights. Original jurisdiction extends when there is a violation of the fundamental rights of individuals, which means if suppose somebody violated your fundamental rights. It can be a person, an organization, association, even the government violated your fundamental rights. Somebody negates your fundamental rights, denies your fundamental rights. In such situation, it is the responsibility of the Supreme Court to protect the fundamental rights of every individual. If it is violated for you, it is the responsibility of the Supreme Court to protect your fundamental rights. In order to ensure that you are protected or your fundamental rights are protected, the court can issue several writs. So, in the last class, we have discussed about different writs. Altogether, the Supreme Court can issue 5 different writs. Can you recollect the names of those 5 different writs? First one, habeas corpus. Second one, mandamus. Third one, writ of prohibition. Fourth one, writ of certiorari. And fifth one, quo warranto. These are the 5 different writs by which the court can make sure that your fundamental rights are protected. And by issuing these writs, the court will make sure that, or the court can enforce your fundamental or the individual's fundamental rights. Okay. Anyone can approach the Supreme Court for fundamental rights. So if anybody or any agency or government by any means, if your fundamental rights are violated, somebody denies your fundamental rights, of course you can directly approach the Supreme Court for the enforcement of the fundamental rights. So that is the second occasion. First one, central state or interstate disputes. It will be directly coming in the Supreme Court. Second one, protection of the fundamental rights can directly go to the Supreme Court. Third one is transfer of cases from lower courts. Under Article 139A, inserted by the 44th Amendment in 1978, the Supreme Court may transfer to itself cases from one or more high courts. So, according to the 44th Amendment 1978, Article 139A, the Supreme Court can transfer a case from the lower courts to itself. Or in other words, Supreme Court can transfer any case from any subordinate courts to itself. Itself means to the Supreme Court itself, according to the 44th Amendment 1978, Article 139A. But before transferring cases from lower court to the Supreme Court, certain criteria will be there in which Supreme Court has to look into. First one, if these involve questions of law. So if there is some further explanation, further interpretation, or certain special type of matters are involved, questions of law, in such cases, those cases can transfer to the Supreme Court. Or cases are of great importance. Suppose if there is a controversial issue in which everybody thinks that the presence of Supreme Court is needed, involvement of Supreme Court must be there because it is such an important case. So in such case, the Supreme Court can transfer those cases to the Supreme Court or to itself. That is about the third one, transfer of cases from lower courts to the Supreme Court. Now the fourth situation is interpretation of Constitution. Let's see what is meant by interpretation of Constitution. Cases required interpretation of the Constitution can be directly filed in the Supreme Court. There can be certain cases in which more explanation and interpretation according to the Constitution it is required. Because if there is a statement in a Constitution, the Constitution says that if a person is done a crime, that person must have given this particular punishment. But if it is for self-defense, there the situation changes. Suppose, just imagine, if a person murdered one another person, and in one case, he did it just for his personal benefit, maybe for a robbery. When he was attempting for a robbery, he murdered someone. In the other case, he murdered somebody for his self-defense. When he was trying to protect himself, by mistake, the murder took place. Both are murder, but situation is different. So the punishment also will be different. One person will be getting imprisonment, the other person may be not feeling guilty. Okay, so that is meant by interpretation of Constitution. So in such cases, the Supreme Court can directly, or anybody can directly file those kinds of cases in the Supreme Court, which comes under original jurisdiction. Supreme Court has the power of exclusive jurisdiction to questions as to constitutional validity of central laws. What all laws, what all rules and regulations made by the central government in the parliament, all those will be coming to the Supreme Court, and its explanation, its interpretation and further clarification on that law will be given by the Supreme Court. It's only on the basis of the interpretation of the Supreme Court the other courts can make verdicts on those cases. So dear students, what we were discussing in this class, today we were discussing about original jurisdiction. Okay, first category of jurisdiction, that is original jurisdiction, under which we have seen four important points. First one, central state or interstate disputes. If there is an issue between central government and a state government, or if there is an issue between two different states. Okay, so in such cases, all those cases will be going to the Supreme Court. Second one, protection of fundamental rights. Enforcement of fundamental rights will be taking place with the support of Supreme Court. Third one, transfer of cases from lower courts. According to the seriousness of the case, according to the popularity of the importance of the case, the Supreme Court can transfer cases from the lower court to itself. And fourth one, interpretation of Constitution. In certain cases, if further explanation and interpretations are needed related to the Constitution, all those cases can be filed in the Supreme Court directly. So that's what is meant by original jurisdiction and four different powers vested with the Supreme Court related to the original jurisdiction. And with this, we are winding up today's class, and I hope you have got a very clear idea about the different points related to this original jurisdiction. And the next class, we will be discussing about appellate jurisdiction. And still then, I would like to sign off. Thank you.